Hello, everyone. I was tagged by Mike over at his YouTube channel, Gray 1951, to do a video on a favorite film from 10, my top 10 favorite film directors. I always have a really difficult time making 10 best lists because I'm just not genetically disposed towards it. So I picked 10 movies that are real favorites that I haven't made a video on before, figuring that if it's a favorite movie, it's probably by a favorite director. I will say, though, there's something that's set in stone as far as this kind of topic is that my favorite director is Alfred Hitchcock, and my favorite Hitchcock movie is Rear Window. And I don't think I'll ever change that in the time I have left on this earth. But he did a real interesting took a real interesting slant on the topic, picking B-movie directors. Mine is kind of a collective of real classic movies and movies that I think are and movie directors that I like a lot that are kind of under the radar, as that's my main interest in movies nowadays, is the films that go under the radar. But my first two are definitely not under the radar movies. And I'm going to do these in chronological order. My first one is a Hollywood comedy from the 30s, my favorite Howard Hawks movie, Bringing Up Baby. It's a movie that I loved when I was a kid. I still love it today. There's not too many movies that are kind of like that. I've probably seen it more times than any other movie. Maybe The Apartment. It's probably neck and neck with Billy Wilder's The Apartment. And I also wanted to bring it up because it's being released for the first time on Blu-ray, I think July 6th. So it's going to be part of the Barnes & Noble Criterion half-price sale. I'm very lucky in that I live within about 30 minutes of 5 different Barnes & Noble stores, and I hardly ever go to stores anymore, but I just love going to a Barnes & Noble sale. Sometimes you bump into other movie lovers, and it's just kind of fun when you buy everything online to go into a store and pick up titles that you really want, have them in hand. And I imagine Bring Up Baby, since it's one of the most desired Blu-ray titles that never came out on Blu-ray, I imagine that one's going to sell pretty fast. Next up is another comedy. I think a good case can be made that Hollywood pre-war, what they did best is they made comedies. They had so much talent there in the 1930s, and people liked to laugh. They liked to laugh at the rich people during the time of the Depression. And there were some great screenwriters who became directors. One such as Preston Sturges, always one of my favorite directors. And I've at various times in my life, I guess I liked other Sturges movies, Miracle of Morgan's Creek, Sullivan's Travels. But I think The Lady Eve, through the years, he had A-list stars, and Barbara Stanwyck, Henry Fonda. It's very funny. It's not as frantic until the very end of the movie. It really focuses in on the romance, and all of Preston Sturges' stock company is there to supply the comic shtick that Stanwyck and Fonda leave room for. They're both spectacular in this comedy. That's from the 40s and the 50s. I think Hollywood did women's pictures very well. They did the Weepies. No one was better at doing it than Douglas Sirk. I think the saddest film is probably Imitation of Life, at least the final funeral scene. But All That Heaven Allows doesn't really ramp up the melodrama quite as much as, say, Written on the Wind or Imitation of Life. It's a more quiet movie. The two focuses very intently on the romance between Jane Wyman and Rock Hudson. It's the most overtly critical critique of upper middle class values, materialistic values that sneaks into all his films, his Hollywood films, remade by Werner Fassbinder as Ali Fear Eats the Soul. A couple of the reasons I really love this movie is I love the scene where when Jane Wyman, who's the older woman to Rock Hudson's younger man, who not only is younger, but he's of a different class of people than the upper middle class of the Jane Wyman. Her two oldest kids object. Also, her friends object to her romance with Rock Hudson, so she breaks it off. But they're college age, they're going off living their own life. She's left all alone. How is she going to fill the emptiness? They don't want her to have the true love of her life with Rock Hudson. So they wheel in at Christmas time. They wheel in a television set, still a fairly, it wasn't in everybody's home yet, and it wasn't in Jane Wyman's home. And the implication was this was going to fill up the emptiness of your life, and you see her face reflected in the glass of the television screen. But I also love the change of seasons in this movie. In the cover, you see the great autumnal hues, and then which is about maybe first 2/3 of the movie. In the last third, we have winter and snow, and you almost drown. Rock Hudson almost drowns in the snow. And it's a very beautiful back to nature. It's not overstated. Well, I guess some people might say it is a bit overstated, but I think it's beautifully done and very heartfelt movie. I think Douglas Sirk's certainly my favorite Douglas Sirk movie. Next, we'll go on to some movie from 1970, and it was made by Arthur Penn, and Penn in 1967 with Bonnie and Clyde became a real hot property. He was, as the studio system was fading, he connected with the new younger audience. He was a with it director. He directed Alice's Restaurant from Arlo Guthrie song about going to your physical in the draft when people were 1A. Movies hardly ever really, in that era, hardly ever confronted Vietnam, but they did rather obliquely, metaphorically, in his Penn's 1970 movie, Little Big Man. It was from a novel by Thomas Berger, and I loved the novel, and Berger, one of my favorite novelists, and Hoffman, of course, was hot from The Graduate, a movie too that ignored Vietnam and ignored the fact that when Benjamin Braddock, Dustin Hoffman, got out of college, what was his draft status, 1A? Anybody that age got out of college was quickly turned into 1A, and you had to check the mail every day to make sure to see if your draft board had caught up with you. But Little Big Man was seen at the time as a metaphor for Vietnam, a Western in which a Native American village is massacred based on a true incident, which everybody at the time could easily equate with what we were doing in Vietnam to some peasant villages. But as certainly Thomas Berger's novel was not about Vietnam, and really this movie is not really about Vietnam either. I mean, when you look at it from 50 years in the distance, it's about mythology. It's about the legends of the mythology of nationhood, and Custer is a big figure in this. And was Custer a dunce and incompetent, or was he a national hero? These are the kind of John Ford often confronted that. Print the legend. Ford would show you everything behind the legend. What Custer, he even made a Custer movie, and a sort of Custer movie in Fort Apache. Custer here is played by Robert Milligan, I think his name was, and he always gave some really strange performances. And and when I first saw this movie, I didn't like his interpretation of Custer, but I've come to like it, and I've come to like this movie a lot. And I think it's a beautifully filmed movie. It's Arthur Penn at his best as a movie director. After this was a big hit, and after Little Big Man, Penn's career really never gained much traction. He made some good movies, but they didn't really make an impact. He became largely forgotten. In 1970, he was considered one of the great filmmakers in the world. Next, we come to a Robert Altman film of the same era, And Altman was definitely a hot director who could also communicate to the counterculture with MASH. This is his take on Philip Marlowe, Raymond Chandler, The Long Goodbye with Elliot Gould, Elliot Gould's period of being a leading man. It's from a Lee Brackett screenplay, and Lee Brackett had worked with Howard Hawks. I believe she worked on The Big Sleep, and certainly she worked on many other Hawks movies. She liked this, Altman's interpretation of her screenplay for The Long Goodbye. It's certainly a I don't know, of a deconstruction, but a different take on Chandler, and yet it remains remarkably faithful to the spirit of him. Gould is kind of a casual. It's okay with me is this constant line. Yet everything is not okay with Elliot Gould's Philip Marlowe. Certainly, there's a moment in this movie, one of the most shocking, violent moments I've ever experienced in a movie theater. I remember when I first saw it, it took me about 10 minutes to recover from it. And also there is another thing that's not okay with Gould's Philip Marlowe is being betrayed by a friend. Carol Rice was a very interesting director, Eastern European, went to England he was an editor. He was part of what's labeled as the kitchen sink era. Went to the U.S. He made some remarkable films. The Gambler in 1974 with James Caan. But I think my favorite Carol Rice movie is Who'll Stop the Rain. It's also my favorite Nick Nolte movie. Might even be my favorite Michael Moriarty movie. It's definitely not my favorite Tuesday Weld movie. That's Lord Love a Duck. Also, maybe perhaps my favorite Anthony Zerbe movie. Anybody who's familiar with Anthony Zerbe, one of the great character actors in this period in film history, and he's very good in this. This too based on a novel by Robert Stone. I love Robert Stone. He's another one of my favorite novelists, very underrated. The novel was called Dog Soldiers, and it was changed to Who'll Stop the Rain because they use a lot of Creedence Clearwater Revival songs in the movie, especially the final shootout. It's one of the great shootouts in movie lore, I believe. And I think the title is actually an improvement over Dog Soldiers Who'll Stop the Rain. This is another movie that has Vietnam implications, and overtly as Michael Moriarty is part of a heroin drug deal. The drugs coming from Vietnam. Nolte is the ultimate loyal friend. He's the ultimate warrior. He sees through all the bullshit. He sees that Moriarty's gone wrong. He's in love with Moriarty's wife, played by Tuesday Weld, the love of his life. He'll do anything to protect her. It's a terrific movie, and it was released by Twilight Time, and this is a MGM release. I think it's a new 4K transfer. I bought this a couple months ago. I haven't yet to watch it because I do want to do a full-length video on Who'll Stop the Rain. And I only have one foreign film in this list of favorites, and one of my favorite foreign films is the French director Eric Rohmer. And he's very different than all these other Hollywood commercial films. He wrote a book about Hitchcock, along with Jacques Rivette, and a lot of people wonder, well, where's Hitchcock in Eric Rohmer? But I don't know, for some reason I do see Hitchcock. I see suspense in his movies, and part of his comedies and proverbs is a movie called Boyfriends and Girlfriends. It's also known as my girlfriend's boyfriend, I think, is another title, in English language title. This is a DVD. I think Arrow Academy has it out on Blu-ray. I do not have the Blu-ray of this. And this is from around 1980. And Eric Rohmer was a filmmaker who basically made movies about young people in their 20s. They were making decisions on what they wanted to do with their life, who they're falling in love with, making perhaps the most important decision that a young person makes is who you choose to marry. Um, some of this comes into play in Boyfriends and Girlfriends. It's a film not set in Paris, as many of Rohmer's films are. It's not set on vacation. It's set in a kind of newly built suburb of Paris, where the main character is. It's the kind of a sort of a self-contained suburb where you can work there. You don't have to do long commutes. She is presented as somebody who's very alone in life, but then she does meet another young woman. They become fast friends, and she falls in love with that best friend's boyfriend. And I think there's two reasons, and there's two reasons that I prefer this. This is probably my favorite Eric Rohmer film, and if you've ever seen an Eric Rohmer film, you know there's lots of walking around. I love to walk, and so do Rohmer's characters. And there, I think it was one of the best, most emotionally intense moment or walk in this film, where the two of them discover the fact that they love each other, and they have a bond that it's kind of transcendent, that they just can't ignore. It also has a joyful ending, and joyful endings are pretty that seem authentic and don't just seem a tacked on happy ending are pretty rare in movies. And Rohmer is such an understated director that the first time you watch this film, you might not even notice the joyfulness of it, but I've watched it many times since that first time, and sometimes I almost feel like clapping. It's just such a beautiful, appropriate, and again, joyful ending. Next film is directed by Stephen Frears, who became a very prolific director. He won Academy Awards, all kinds of different movies, but I really love his first film, and it's The Hit. And it's got a great cast. It's got Terrence Stamp and John Hurt and Tim Roth. It's Stephen Frears' debut feature film. It's also Tim Roth's first feature film. It's kind of an existential gangster film. It's a road movie. On the commentary includes a good bit of Stephen Frears' regrets that he didn't make this a more perfect film. He could have made it a lot sharper and more in focus. But I love the languorous mood of this film. It just sort of like exists, and for a gangster film, that's pretty unusual. Laura Del Sol is just an absolutely spectacularly voluptuous adversary for John Hurt. Tim Roth is spectacular in his film debut, and Terrence Stamp his confrontation with death is truly remarkable. One of Terrence Stamp's most remarkable film performances. Next up is another movie from a book that I very much like, John Bowles' The Sheltering Sky. This is the film adaptation by Bernardo Bertolucci. Bertolucci, of course, of The Last Emperor, and won the Academy Awards with that. And Last Tango in Paris has tarnished his reputation, I think, fairly significantly in recent years in this treatment of Maria Schneider. But this is, I love the novel. I've read the novel several times. About every few years I read it, and I just get totally absorbed in it. And I thought Bertolucci did a very good adaptation of the movie. It's well cast. John Malkovich and especially Deborah Winger. They catch the idea of identity, the loss of identity in a foreign country, in a land of sand and Western culture subsumed by the culture of Arab culture, Muslim culture. And John Bowles himself turns up at the end of the movie. It also has two terrific supporting performances by Jill Bennett and Timothy Spall. It's really it's definitely my favorite Bernardo Bertolucci movie. And last but not least is a film by Paul Schrader, and I think a lot of people might say Paul Schrader's best movies are the screenplays that he wrote for Martin Scorsese. Scorsese's movies always on this big and broad canvas, and Schrader's screenplays that he directed himself are a much smaller scale, and they're very different from one from another. And ironically enough, I think all Schrader's movies that he directed were from his own screenplay, except for this movie. This is another Criterion movie, came out last year, A Comfort of Strangers. And I just fall in love with this movie every time I see it. It has a gruesome ending, but it's my favorite movie set in Venice. I don't know, maybe summertime, maybe Don't Look Now, but certainly Schrader uses Venice spectacularly well. And he was a director for hire. I think John Schlesinger was supposed to make this movie. He dropped out. Schrader, I guess, he could make a movie in Venice, who would turn that down. He would make a movie with a terrific cast, and what Schrader thought was a fantastic screenplay, and so it is, by Harold Pinter. It's based on a novel by Ewan McEwen. It's really more a novella. You could probably read it in about 90 minutes, and Pinter is very faithful to it, but some of the dialogue from the novella is actually in the movie, but the sense of menace, it's really, he elevates that story into a Harold Pinter kind of world. And again, the cast, spectacular. Natasha Richardson and Rupert Everett are supposed to play one of the most eye-catching, beautiful couples as well. They do in Beauty, the danger that lurks behind Beauty, the beauty of Venice, the beauty of Rupert Everett. It also has and Helen Mirren is also in the cast. But Christopher Walken gives one of his most spectacularly unusual performance. He catches the line readings of Harold Pinter's so perfectly. And Schrader is left not having to worry about the script, and Pinter rehearsed the script with the actors for I think 2 weeks. She came to Rome where they filmed the interiors. But so Schrader is left to be a director in the old Hollywood vein, where he's directing a script from somebody else, and he orchestrates. I mean, stylistically, visually, it's just. It's a beautiful film, and he orchestrates the set design, the cinematography, the music, the performances, all of them. Everything works, I think, in this movie, In the Comfort of Strangers. So that's my 10 movies. If you have any comments on any of these films, or what favorite films you might have, of course, comments are always welcome. Thanks a lot for listening. You guys take care.